Doctor, I've read that all people are naturally wired for bias. Is that an accurate statement? And
1,000%.
what does that mean?
So the way the brain works is efficiency. It's incredible with the way that we're wired. And so the brain will try to automatically route things as efficiently as possible. And so the bias means the brain goes, okay, you look like this, I'm going to put you in a category, and I'm going to put everybody with a similar characteristic in that same category. And the brain likes chunking things. It's like there's these little buckets. They're actually neural networks, but think of it like a bucket. And then everything similar now gets a sticky. And so now I'm associating this person in front of me without consciously realizing it with all my past experience, projection, stereotypes, whatever, with this person in a split second. You know, the book Blink is a great resource to recognize how instantaneous this process is, that the brain naturally leans toward bias instead of coming to every situation new. I mean, I'd have to go, computer, what is this thing, right? Person with legs, talking language, everything would be so sluggish and obsolete if our brain was a computer having to come at every single thing as a new and novel situation. So the brain is creating all these automaticity routes so that your brain can go, oh, that's what this is, that's what that bucket is. And so then we catch it along the way going, oh my gosh, that was a bias. That wasn't a fair assumption that I made about that person. There was an example where a woman is an attorney, and she was stopped by the security guard because she was African American when the other white colleagues were not stopped. And it wasn't necessarily a malicious, I'm being racist. It was more his stereotype was, oh, if you are African American in this part of the court area, then you're probably more of a client person than an actual attorney person. And so those biases come up where we're leaning in directions of automaticity. And so I think that's the value of today's conversation, is that we're taking the shame off of it, that this really is how the brain is wired, but it doesn't mean that I don't have to do the work to not work on it. It just means I understand that it's there, and now I have some tools to come against that and come at every situation and every individual with curiosity and humility.
So do we unconsciously look for patterns or things that we kind of, this may not be the right word, but internally stereotype?
Absolutely. The brain feels more comfortable when things are chunked and orderly and linear, even if reality isn't. Reality is more messy and divergent, but in the brain's way of functioning, it really likes to find patterns. So it's like, this male, well then a male hurt me in the past, so now it's these males are all bad, or female or African American or Hispanic or Asian or Caucasian, whatever the category is, the brain will naturally create these linear connections and patterns that aren't necessarily real to life, but the brain is trying to pick those up, because then it reduces our anxiety of feeling like I have too many browser windows open in my brain when I say, oh, it's this. Kind of like the puppy and the horse. So kids are learning that and they go, oh, puppy. And so they call all four-legged animals puppy, even though some of them are horses and some of them are cattle and different animals. Those are natural things that we do where we chunk everything into a pattern when it doesn't necessarily belong together.
All right. Tammy and Doris, let's take that from an individual basis and talk about it in a group or in an institutional environment. What is your experience with implicit or unconscious bias, not just for individuals, but I mean, Tammy, for example, you're an HR director in a group setting. How does that work?
Well, actually, when you're looking at this from the perspective of just employment or the hiring process, oftentimes folks are not given a fair shakeout to be considered for positions because they are being scrutinized based on, as Dr. Crawford described, so many of those unconscious thoughts that they've had or experiences from their past that draw conclusions for them of, well, I don't want this candidate to make it to the final round because she lives in this neighborhood or she graduated from this school, which might be an HBCU or just not what's conducive to what that particular person is imagining is a good fit. And I say fit in quotes because it's not a word that I prefer to use because it does in its own way single out what we're trying to describe. But in that process, we're trying really hard to make sure that folks are being fair and consistent, and making sure that it's important for folks to stop and think about what they're doing. So in the HR world, you try to diversify your committee so that you don't have that one mindset at the table making decisions about who will be selected for the hiring, or even, you know, in the process of employee relations, when you're having to take disciplinary action, you want to make sure that you have folks who know how to be consistent and follow policy minimally, because that, if the policies are written with fairness and equity at the forefront, then that helps us reach a fair conclusion. So people really do, they really do, in the world of employment, there are so many opportunities for folks to inject a bias mindset. And as HR, we have to ensure that those policies are in place to help them get back on track, because it's not meant to, it can be a liability for the organization, honestly.
And I certainly in a moment want to get into how to deal with it. Let me ask and Doris, certainly would welcome your thoughts as well. To all of you, is this a fair statement that similar individuals or in-group members are often rewarded while dissimilar or out-of-group members are disadvantaged? Do you find that to be true? And if so, why? How does that occur?
I'd say that that's true. It's true in so many ways, because that's how the rich continue to get richer and the poor continue to get poorer, right? You have the folks who are reaching out to their friends, folks who are in their circle, and they are providing opportunities and offers to those folks without maybe presenting an opportunity or broadening the scope of folks having an opportunity to be a part of something that they wouldn't typically be a part of. So.
All right, thank you. And Dr. Crawford, from a clinical perspective, would you agree with that statement?
I think at a macro level that the brain really likes familiarity. There's something that feels secure and safe about that. But it doesn't necessarily have to only be to skin color or neighborhood. It could be anything that draws people together. For instance, people of faith tend to kind of draw together. So it's something that would lower the boundaries of feeling like othered, of nobody knows me and I'm scared and overwhelmed. And so we all have that natural anxiety of the unknown. And so when you're gravitating towards somebody, it's usually because you found something that feels familiar, that's kind of an inroad to draw you toward them. And the brain naturally kind of reverts going, hey, I don't have a template for this. I don't know what to expect or anticipate. So I'm going to pull away from what's not familiar to me instead of leaning in. And that's where we have to consciously make the effort to lean into relationships and people and events that are not our natural and our familiar, because then that lowers that central nervous response that goes fight or flight, something new, unexpected. And then instead now training the central nervous system, hey, I'm okay, this is a positive experience, positive people to be around. And then you can lean into those other groups that you might have been reticent to do so in the past.